The police lights flashed across the quiet ranch road, turning dust into red and blue shadows. No one expected this call would expose a truth powerful enough to end an entire HOA. Daniel stood calmly near the wooden gate of his ranch as officers stepped out of their cars. Across the fence, HOA board members whispered with confidence, certain the law was on their side. For weeks, they had claimed the ranch land was community property, even though Daniel's family had lived there for decades. That morning, they made their boldest move yet, calling the police to remove him from what they insisted was not his land. Daniel said nothing as accusations filled the air. He had learned that silence can be louder than arguments. The officers asked for documents. HOA leaders proudly handed over maps, outdated surveys, and printed bylaws. They spoke with authority, promising the officers that this was a clear case of illegal occupation. Daniel simply nodded and told the officers there was one thing everyone was missing. This ranch was not just land, it was history, contracts, and promises buried deeper than anyone imagined. As the officers reviewed both sides, Daniel's lawyer arrived quietly, carrying a single folder. Inside it was proof no one at the HOA expected to see. Daniel watched the confident faces across the fence slowly change. The police paused, realizing this situation was far bigger than a simple property dispute. And that was the moment everyone understood this ranch held a secret that would soon flip the power forever. The meeting room felt colder than the open fields outside the ranch, every chair held tension, and every breath carried uncertainty. The HOA demanded an emergency legal meeting, convinced they would win once paperwork was reviewed. Daniel arrived last, calm and composed, while board members lined up their arguments like weapons. They believed numbers, influence, and pressure would finally force him to surrender. What they didn't know was that Daniel had prepared for this day long before the first accusation was made. The HOA president opened with authority, explaining how the ranch boundaries overlapped community plans. She spoke confidently, pointing to enlarged maps on the wall. Several members nodded, already imagining victory. Daniel listened patiently, never interrupting. When it was his turn, he placed his folder on the table and slid out a series of aged documents, each stamped and signed decades earlier. Silence replaced confidence. These papers showed land rights granted before the HOA ever existed. More than that, they revealed a clause no one noticed, a clause stating the ranch retained permanent ownership and access rights, immune to future associations. Daniel's grandfather had secured it after a long legal battle, protecting generations to come. The HOA attorney read the clause twice, then once more, growing pale with every word. The room shifted. What started as an attack now felt like a trap closing in reverse. Board members avoided eye contact, realizing they had pushed too far, and just when they thought it couldn't get worse, Daniel calmly asked one question that changed everything. Daniel's voice was steady, but the weight of his question filled the room. Did any of you actually read the original land agreement? No one answered. The silence was louder than shouting. The HOA attorney admitted they had relied on newer documents, assuming older records were irrelevant. That assumption was now their greatest mistake. Daniel explained how the ranch was not only private property, but also protected under a regional land preservation agreement. Any attempt to seize or restrict it carried serious legal consequences. The board members shifted uncomfortably. Their confidence had turned into quiet fear. Daniel wasn't angry, he was disappointed. He spoke about how his family maintained the land responsibly, respecting neighbors while being targeted repeatedly by false claims and warnings. The HOA had ignored letters, dismissed evidence, and escalated matters without verification. The attorney requested a recess. Whispers filled the hallway as board members argued among themselves. Some blamed leadership, others blamed pride. Outside, news of the meeting spread quickly. Residents who once trusted the HOA now questioned everything they were hearing. When the meeting resumed, the attorney admitted the truth. The HOA had no legal standing. Worse, their actions could be seen as harassment and misuse of authority. The room felt smaller as reality settled in. What began as a power move was unraveling fast. Daniel gathered his documents calmly, knowing the hardest part was over. But the final outcome would still shock everyone watching. The following day, a formal notice was delivered to every homeowner. It wasn't written by the HOA, it was written about them. The document explained that the association had acted beyond its authority, involving law enforcement without verified claims. Residents were stunned. Many had believed the HOA was protecting community interests. Now they learned those actions had placed the entire association at legal risk. An independent review was ordered. Emails, complaints, and enforcement records were examined. Patterns began to emerge. The ranch wasn't the first target, just the first one prepared to fight back. Several homeowners stepped forward, sharing stories of pressure, threats, and unfair fines. What looked like order was revealed to be control. Daniel stayed out of the spotlight. He let the facts speak. Investigators confirmed the HOA ignored legal warnings and continued aggressive actions anyway. Their decision to call police became a turning point, exposing everything they tried to hide. Within days, the board was suspended pending results. Meetings were canceled. Authority was frozen. The same leaders who once stood confidently at Daniel's gate now avoided public view. Residents demanded accountability, transparency, and change. The ranch stood quietly through it all, unchanged and unbothered. Daniel walked the land at sunset, knowing his grandfather's foresight had protected more than property, it protected truth. But the final decision was still coming, and it would leave no doubt who truly held the power. The final hearing arrived with no applause, no cameras, and no shouting, just consequences. The review board delivered its findings clearly. The HOA had violated its own rules, misrepresented land claims, and abused authority. The attempt to claim the ranch as community property was officially declared false. More importantly, the HOA was ordered to restructure entirely, removing those responsible for the misconduct. Residents listened in disbelief. The same leaders who promised protection had nearly cost them legal stability. Fines were issued. Legal fees were assigned. The association was placed under strict oversight. The power dynamic shifted completely. Daniel was asked to speak. He didn't celebrate. He didn't accuse. He simply reminded everyone that respect and responsibility matter more than control. Communities thrive on trust, not intimidation. The room felt lighter after his words, as if something heavy had finally been lifted. Outside, neighbors approached him with apologies and gratitude. Some admitted they believed the HOA without question. Daniel smiled, understanding how easily authority can blur judgment. The ranch remained his, untouched and protected. The land that once caused conflict now became a symbol of restraint and wisdom. And as the sun set over the fields, Daniel knew this story would travel far beyond the fence lines. But one final twist remained, one that no one expected. Weeks later, a surprising letter arrived at Daniel's ranch. It wasn't a warning. It was an invitation. The newly appointed HOA committee asked Daniel to serve as an advisor. They wanted guidance from someone who understood both land and fairness. The irony wasn't lost on him. The same group that tried to remove him now sought his wisdom. Daniel accepted with conditions. Transparency would come first. Rules would apply equally. And no homeowner would ever face intimidation again. The committee agreed unanimously. Change had replaced pride. Under the new structure, trust slowly returned. Meetings became open. Decisions were documented. Residents felt heard for the first time in years. The ranch became a reminder that standing firm doesn't require aggression, just truth and patience. Looking back, Daniel realized the police call that morning wasn't an attack. It was a trigger. A moment that exposed weakness disguised as authority. The HOA didn't just lose a case, they learned a lesson. As Daniel walked through his land once more, he understood that power fades when challenged by facts. And sometimes, the quietest voice carries the strongest proof. All that remained was to share this story with the world. The ranch stood peaceful again, just as it always had, but nothing around it was the same. The HOA that once claimed ownership no longer existed in its old form. In its place stood a fair, accountable community guided by lessons learned the hard way. Residents felt safer, more united, and more aware of the importance of questioning authority. Daniel never asked for recognition. He only wanted truth to stand where false power once ruled. His family's land remained protected, not by force, but by preparation and integrity. The police call that was meant to remove him ended up removing something far bigger: unchecked control. This story spread across neighborhoods and online forums, reminding people that documents matter, history matters, and silence paired with preparation can change everything. The HOA learned the day that ownership isn't claimed through pressure, but proven through truth, and that was the final twist in this unbelievable HOA story. If you loved the drama, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment sharing your thoughts. It really helps this channel grow.